Welcome to The Author Show, where we feature new authors and books, from fiction to self-help and everything in between. You'll find it all at theauthorshow.com. That's theauthorshow.com. And now let the show begin.
Hello and welcome back to the show. This is your host, Don McCauley. Today we're welcoming program author Danielle M. Orsino, and she is the author of Birth of the Fae, Locked Out of Heaven, Book 1. Before I bring in today's guest, a quick reminder that selected interviews are available at our website, as well as on major platforms like Amazon Music, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Pandora, and many more. Danielle, how are you?
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Well, tell us a little bit about yourself, please.
I am a nurse, martial artist, and now currently an author of the Birth of the Fae series.
So tell us about your book.
My book, Birth of the Fae, Locked Out of Heaven, Book 1, is based on the idea that there are angels who can no longer go home, and they are stuck here on Earth, and they have to find new identities and a whole new way of life.
Now, who did you write your book for specifically? Who's your target audience here?
My target audience is skewed primarily toward men, about 25 and up. I find that LARPers, live action role playing, and Dungeons and Dragons game players, especially my cosplaying fans, they tend to really love this book and get lost in the world of the Fae.
So could you say there's any type of central message or perhaps underlying theme that you would say runs throughout your book?
The underlying message or the theme of the book, I think, is more of a study of point of view, in that these angels and now Fae, if they would just have a conversation, I think we've all been in this position, they could probably clear up a lot of this miscommunication. So I think the readers specifically would walk away with the idea that you never know what people are going through and that we all have a bad day. So I would love if the reader kind of walked away with maybe having a little more grace toward each other, which in this day and age, I think we could all use.
So if you had to choose, what would you say is the single most important idea you're sharing in your book that's really going to add value to the reader's life?
I think the biggest idea I would love for a reader to take away is this idea of grace for each other. In the book, the two factions of angels that break up, the Power Brigade and the Virtue Angels, they have elitist attitudes and kind of this attitude of I'm not good enough. And that creates that schism and that miscommunication. And I believe that we all have that. And I would love if the reader would walk away with that idea of having grace for one another, but also the idea of found family. I think that is something that's really important. And I would love if the reader could look at their own world and society as a whole a little bit differently, and perhaps think about their family and friends, and that found family is something that we could expand upon as a society and realize it's very, very important. And sometimes your friends become your family. And that's what the Fae represent a lot to each other, is that found family becomes their knit group and their support system.
So if you were asked to compare your book with any book out there we might already be familiar with, which book would it be and why?
I've been compared to Game of Thrones and A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J. Maas. But the comparison has come from both of them, is that I'm both of those books, but without the smut, which I take as a huge compliment. There is not a lot of romance or smut in the series, especially not in the first book, Locked Out of Heaven. There's political intrigue. There is a lot of great fight scenes because I am a martial artist, but I am not smutty. So those two books are the books I get compared the most with, but I lack the smut, so to speak.
So tell us about some of the characters in the book.
The characters in the book, my main protagonist is Queen Aurora, who rules the Court of Light. And then her main antagonist, who I like to think of as more of your brooding anti-hero, is King Jarvok, who rules the Court of Dark. He is a Power Brigade angel, and he starts out in the series as the warrior with no name, and then slowly kind of works into his power. And he's based off a lot of the character Magneto from X-Men. You might not agree with his methodology,